Hello there. Tensions over the Ukraine have eased just a little tiny bit today after some US-Russia dialogue, but the fat lady's not singing quite yet. Russia put in some demands in the form of 2 draft treaties last month that, if accepted by the West, would redraw the post-Cold War geopolitical security map for Europe. Moscow basically wants NATO to agree to stop all expansion eastwards and not take on new member states. And it would also mean ceasing all military activities in Eastern Europe and the majority of the old USSR by pulling what Russia sees as foreign military forces out of countries that were not in NATO before 1997, such as Bulgaria and Romania. Further, Putin wants to set up a bilateral arrangement solely with the US concerning Europe, presumably a ploy to try and separate the US from the rest of NATO. And the result would be a Russia with a new sphere of influence carved out for itself, with its intent demonstrated by the Russian military build-up of over 100,000 troops and military assets to the east of Ukraine, as well as in the Crimea to the south in the Black Sea. But the West has not yet replied to those proposals, other than to make clear that any Russian incursion into the Ukraine will be met by a swift, severe and united response by the US and its allies. But exactly what that response could be and which allies would be involved is not made clear, at least not to me. But one unnamed senior US official did say to the press last month, just as this unfolded, that we will not compromise on key principles on which European security is built. All countries have the right to decide their own future and their own foreign policy, free from outside interference, and that goes for Ukraine, and it also goes for NATO allies and the alliance itself. And in the last few days we've had the US President Joe Biden talking about this, although he did cause a bit of consternation in Kiev when he just about conceded that a minor incursion by Moscow into the Ukraine would be sort of okay, something that his spokesperson Jen Psaki had to come and sort out later. And President Zelensky of Ukraine was not best pleased with Biden's gaffe either. And now both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss have been more vocal about Ukraine, saying that Russia will suffer greatly if it invades the country, while Germany now says that it is ready to suffer the economic consequences of supporting Ukraine, presumably a reference to their almost total reliance on Russian gas. And news is emerging that extra UK troops could be sent along with other NATO forces to countries in the area that are members of NATO, like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. But these would presumably only be there to ensure that Russia does not threaten a NATO member state, and Ukraine is not a member of NATO. But Russia will no doubt view this as a provocation anyway. But apart from looking to bolster NATO member state defences, little has been done militarily, it appears, to deter Russia from taking at least a part of the Ukraine to secure a land bridge between Russia and the Crimea, a region that Russia had already annexed in 2014. Now, tensions have been eased very slightly today after a meeting between the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But that was only because both sides got a clearer idea of what the other side wanted. But Blinken made it clear that Ukraine had the right to decide its own future and that Russia had a choice between diplomacy and conflict, and that the US would meet them on either path. While Lavrov denied Russia wanted to invade Ukraine and said it was NATO and the US ramping up fears by sending their troops into the region. And as an aside, the Russian Navy is engaged in exercises with Chinese and Iranian naval vessels in the Indian Ocean at the moment. Now the question is, how would a conflict in the Ukraine be sparked off? Well, the Russians could use the pro-Russian insurgents it has in eastern Ukraine, who control what is known as the Donbass region. The assessment is that Russia could stage a fake incident claiming that Ukrainian forces are attacking Russian-supporting people in the Donbass area and engaging in human rights abuses. Russia could then use that as an excuse to send the tanks in. So then what? Blinken did say that Russia would be met on either the path of diplomacy or on the path of conflict. But if the latter, what would the US and NATO face that conflict with? Now, according to NATO, an important component of NATO's strengthened deterrence and defence posture is military presence in the eastern and southeastern parts of Alliance territory. Allies implemented the 2016 Warsaw Summit decisions to establish NATO's forward presence in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, and to develop a tailored forward presence in the Black Sea region. These decisions demonstrate Allies' solidarity, determination and ability to defend Alliance territory. And it goes on to say that NATO has enhanced its forward presence in the eastern part of the alliance with 4 multinational battalion-sized battle groups in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland on a rotational basis. These are led by the UK, Canada, Germany and the US and are, according to NATO, robust and combat-ready forces. There is also the multinational Division Southeast in Romania. And NATO goes on to say that NATO's forward presence is part of the biggest reinforcement of alliance collective defence in a generation. Forward presence can be rapidly reinforced by additional forces and capabilities. So there are significant NATO military assets in the area in a defensive posture to deter any attack by Russia on a NATO country. But is there any political will, or more importantly, public will, for NATO troops to be used to conduct offensive operations in support of Ukrainian forces? And are these forces sufficient? And if not, how long would it take to build them up? Also, one assumes that unless Russia attacked a NATO country, if the UK government wanted to get involved, MPs might be given a vote on it in the House of Commons on whether or not to support any military action in the Ukraine. Now, MPs don't have to be given that vote, as deploying troops is still a prerogative power of government. The defeat of the government on the Syrian conflict in 2013 changed nothing. But one assumes that the UK squaring off against another nuclear power would spark a bit of a national debate, and that could get very heavy and heated. And I've seen nothing of the UK government trying to get the UK public on side by sort of doing an Iraq war dodgy dossier or trying to scare the people into thinking conflict is the only solution. So one doubts the UK public is anywhere near a war footing. So will it be sanctions and hitting Russia as hard as we can in the finances after it's gone into the Ukraine, rather than taking it on militarily? And although the Blinken-Lavrov meeting generated an extra week of diplomacy, the new German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, did refuse to meet with Joe Biden to discuss the Ukraine crisis. So there are rifts in the West's potential response anyway. Putin must be very pleased. So what's your opinion on Russia and the Ukraine? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.